So hey there, I am Brooke Stiles. I'm the Manager of Communications and Collegiate Operations for the National Office. I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for this session, Brian Losurdo. Brian was initiated at the Barbara Cook chapter at Purdue and is a recipient of Mortarboard's 2019 Alumni Achievement Award. Brian has built a successful career around professional events. He is the founder, president, and CEO of Platinum Roadcase Productions. Please welcome Brian Losurdo.
Hello. So how's my sharing doing? Everybody see that okay?
Looks beautiful.
Looks beautiful. All right. Well, good. First of all, I was just commenting to Brooke as you were all coming in that I gave a presentation in an earlier hour last year's conference. So I think I'm the virtual equivalent of like being between you and the bar. So that's always a tough place to be. But I also want to thank you all for being here. Because I'm sure many of us are thinking, are we really still in this, COVID virtual posture? And I know virtual events are difficult to attend and be committed to. So you all deserve a ton of kudos for your participation. And of course, just congratulations for being here and being mortarboarders, and my personal thanks to you for having interest in my presentation today. And so hopefully I won't disappoint. And then Kayla and Brooke, you can just keep me honest in terms of if there's questions or timing and all of that jazz. So let me get my mouse over to the right place, make sure I can actually toggle through this. And here we go. So again, my name is Brian Losurdo. I'm president and CEO of Platinum Roadcase Productions, a turnkey live event production management firm when it's not COVID, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. But this is the agenda I have planned for us here, roughly speaking, over the next 45 minutes. We'll do a little icebreaker and give you a little bit of background on myself, and then we'll talk a little bit about just a short period of COVID in general and what it's like still being in this posture and how as leaders we can push through that. And then the bulk of the presentation will be on the special event planning process, which is intended to do two things, really, kind of give you an idea of what day-to-day life is like in my industry, but also directly translate into how you can hopefully more successfully plan events for your chapters and on campus. And I will tell you when we get to that section, and I'll remind you when we get there, pretty much the first slide in that section is the key takeaway from the whole 45 minutes. So if you get nothing else and want to screenshot that slide, I'll hold it and point it out when we get there, grab it. And once you've got the recipe, you can roll it. And then we'll do some Q&A at the end. So keep any questions you have jotted down or pump it into the chat. And I'm sure Kayla will let me know how we're tracking. So I always start this, no matter if it's students or potential clients or whoever I'm speaking to, I always ask this question right off the top, which is, of all the events you've ever attended in your life, which event was your favorite event and why? And so actually, let me see if I can get my chat box back. I don't know where it went, but I'll tell you what, Kayla, if you can do me, I lost my chat box because I think I'm in share mode. So I can pull it back.
Yep, I got it for you.
I got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you guys just take a minute, think about, I've got it back now, but think about all the events in your life you've attended and which one's your favorite and why. And just kind of, bounce it into the chat there for me. I just kind of want to get an idea of what you recall in your minds when you think of events, something that was powerful to you. And listen, there's no wrong answer. So whatever comes to your mind, it could literally be, a birthday party, or it could be, anything, which is kind of the point of the exercise. But yeah, so give it a minute. Don't be shy. Come on, Brooke, you have a favorite.
Looks like a lot of people are spinning their wheels in their head.
Yeah, that's okay. It's all right. There's no wrong answer. And if we don't get any, that's fine too. I can push on, but I do want to just give it one more second here to see if we have any takers. Oh, there's one coming in.
Yep, she said the home Ohio State versus Michigan game in 2018. It was my first year and an amazing football game. The energy was thrilling.
Mm-hmm.
Anna said the Purdue annual dinner, generations of Boilermakers and incredible black and gold decorations.
Hi, Anna. It's good to see you. I don't know where you are. Yeah, there you are.
Linda said my cousin Hannah's wedding because it was the first family event after COVID. And I also really liked the ceremony, speaker, and food.
I like it. I see. By the way, the football game, a lot of people don't think of sports as events. They are. So kudos on that one. See, there's some really good stuff coming in. Performing in Mount Rushmore. All right, so Katie, you and I have a connection there. Journalism Education Association, National High School Conference. These are great. I'll be honest with you right now. Oh, see, Harry Styles Live. Yes, event is extremely broad, Sarah. So good on that. Man, you guys did great. I got to be honest with you. This is better than last year's group. No joke. You guys, these are great answers. And so here's the thing. The reason I wanted to ask that, I always want to ask this question is because, first of all, Sarah had it right. That's a very broad question. And that was my point, to make it intentionally broad. Events are different things to different people, and people think events and they think it has to be like, oh, I'm going to see the Rolling Stones. It's not just concerts and theater. It can be anything. It can be going out to dinner. It can be going out with your friends, or going to a campus party on a Friday or Saturday night. It can be a funeral. The point of the event, however, is to create and store a memory within your mind. So a well-produced event stores a memory and causes rapid recall when somebody like me asks that question, or if you're talking amongst friends, triggers a memory and comes right to the forefront. You can share the story about that event. So that's what makes a good event, is if you can just basically permanently embed a memory in a person's mind that triggers memory of good experiences. Maybe the circumstances weren't that great. I use funeral as an example because that is still an event. That's not the greatest of circumstances, but it's still an event, and there may be powerful memories associated with it. So thanks for indulging me in that for just a moment. Get back my mouse back over to the right screen here. Whoops. All right. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on myself, and the purpose of this, the next couple of slides. This is not like resume sharing. Look at me, I'm so awesome. Like, that's not the point. The point is to give you an idea that we all have some connectivity, and that as leaders, our paths may have crossed sort of in the same spheres, and also that by being mortarboarders, you are already defined as a great leader, and it's just a question of what comes next for you. What is your story going to be in a few years, and that's kind of exciting to see how these things pan out. So just as a fellow mortarboarder who, this is my story, and hopefully some of these points of my life will ring with you, and you can see sort of how we're sort of connected in the greater scheme. So I was a member of the 1996 class at the School of Liberal Arts at Purdue. While at Purdue, I was in a variety of student organizations. I was the IFC president. Oh, whose Marlin is that? I have one of those on my wall. Sorry, shiny object. So whoever's got the Marlin, kudos. I've got one of those as well. Love it. We should probably talk later. My apologies. So, yep, IFC president, Iron Key vice chair at Purdue. Iron Key is basically a student cabinet that then when I was at the university, it was a student cabinet to the president of the university. It has a little bit different format today because of restructuring of the administration at Purdue since I've been there. And then, of course, mortarboard. I was in the Greek system, a couple other student organizations as well. Towards the bottom, you'll see 3 bullets. I participated in search committees for 3 administration officials, Vice President for Student Services, Dean of Students, and the Dean of School of Liberal Arts. These were incredible experiences, and if any of you have time and have the opportunity to participate in a search committee while you're still in school, grab that opportunity, because not only is it incredibly rewarding, it's a phenomenal process to just be a part of, but it translates directly into some real world scenarios that you'll be in as you follow your respective career paths. So I highly recommend it. Then I also served as a class respondent, which is a commencement speaker at Purdue. Purdue commencements are interesting. They don't rely on celebrity talent for commencement addresses. They like to keep things within what they call the Purdue family. So traditionally, it's the president of Purdue, or now the provost, and the president of the Alumni Association, and then a member of the graduating class. So, again, just give you an idea of how we all might be connected with our variety of activities while we were in school. And then after I left Purdue, I went on to the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. To work towards my master's. I have a master's in tourism administration, which is the strangest sounding degree name ever. Everybody thinks I have like a master's in tour guiding. That's not what it is. It is actually a business degree at the School of Business and Public Management. Core classes are the same as the MBA students. And then I branched off into a live production track. The reason it's a Master of Tourism Administration degree is because the production and events falls in the tourism industry. And so that's just aptly named based on where we fall. When I graduated, well, a little back up for just a moment. While I was at GW, I was interning for a great production company in DC called the TCI Companies. You'll see it on this slide as well. And it was a wonderful graduate internship. And I had wanted to work for the company, but when I was graduating graduate school, they were only able to offer me a position in their product development department. And I wanted to be in operations, actually doing the productions. Product development was the proposal writing department, and that just was not my cup of tea. So I accepted an offer with the university as manager of their conference management services department. And for those of you who are familiar with GW, it's located within very close proximity to the White House, and there's a lot of dignitary and celebrity events on campus pretty much on a daily basis, and our office handled the bulk of those. And meanwhile, over at the TCI Companies, I was unaware that they were apparently missing me, and so the CEO at the time sent the company president to have lunch with me the first Monday of every month until I finally agreed to come back, which I did. Incredible company to work for. And then unfortunately, the founder and CEO of the company, who her name was Linda Higgison, who I still today call my Yoda because I can hear her in my head giving pearls of wisdom. She and her husband both unexpectedly came down with cancer and passed away rapidly around 2003, 2004. And that's when I started my company to go out on my own, Platinum Road Case. And that's kind of what got me here. Some personal facts. I'm currently 47. I was engaged twice, so married once. So two different women, obviously. Well, maybe not obviously, but two different women, engaged once, married once, divorced once. All great life stories for another time. I had a parallel career in emergency medical services for 18 years. I like to say I'm a wannabe pilot. I had a plane for a while, but had some spine surgeries a few years ago that kept me from keeping my medical current. And so I no longer fly, but I love it. And for any of you that do, kudos. If you're ever down this way, stop by, pick me up for a ride. I had one sibling who actually today is the 12-year anniversary of his passing. He passed away at 31 years of age, and I was the first responder, and I was in my EMS capacity, was the first responder dispatched to his scene of death. So I share that because that's a significant life story, which kind of ties into what we're going to talk about COVID and life being hard in a little bit. I have two daughters. I'm a single dad. I'm well-traveled globally, but I live rurally in north central Arkansas. So what do I do for a living? That's all great, but how does that relate to what I do every day? Well, first and foremost, I'm a business executive. I run a company and I help clients manage their large scale events. When it's not COVID, those are usually large, live scale industrial events. And in that capacity, I serve three roles, which we're going to talk about: live event producer, technical director, and show caller, and stage manager. And each of them have an analogy that I like to use. So live event producer is like if a general contractor in the construction world, you're responsible for the big picture. You're responsible for procurement of physical and human resources related to your event, and for managing all of the finances of that event. Now there's some more nuances and responsibilities, but that's the gist of it. And again, the analogy would be like a general contractor in construction, or maybe even a conductor of an orchestra. And then my favorite role, technical director. Producers can serve as technical directors, but director is my favorite role. And I actually work with a lot of producers who don't like direction. So I love direction, and I'm happy to sit underneath them hierarchically in the director role. The technical director, sometimes called the show caller, the analogy there is they serve as really an air traffic controller, and they're responsible for timing and sequencing. So when you go see a show like a concert or something at theater, you're seeing a fully integrated production experience. You're seeing talent on stage, you're hearing audio, you're seeing special effects, lights moving around, performers doing what they do. But none of that happens without a director who specifically vocalizes that instruction to crew members and talent, so that you can see all of that compartmentalized into one. Again, more nuances there. That's like the 200, 300 level course, but the analogy there is more like air traffic control, putting things in sequence and making sure they happen on time. And then there's the stage manager. The stage manager, the analogy I like here is kind of like a bouncer at a bar. The stage manager is responsible for the physical real estate of the stage, and nothing or no one comes on or off the stage without the stage manager approving it and directing it. The stage manager works in close contact with the producer and director, and then during the show itself, very closely with the director. The stage manager is downline from the director, but a good director lets the stage manager do his or her thing. because without them, your shows just can't be a success. All that being said, what do we all have in common besides our mortarboard membership, and maybe some of the things that you feel we've connected through what I've shared with you? My answer to this is always the happy burden of leadership. We're all leaders, and that in and of itself can be challenging and fun at the same time. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about that during the Q&A. So briefly, let's just touch on where we are with leadership during COVID. Again, I have to say, I'm impressed with all of you participating. I cannot imagine. I think of my time in college and how I just can't imagine having the ability to adapt as well as you all have. So, I mean, kudos to you for pushing through this. For some of you, you're probably in your second year now of college of being impacted by this, and I just can't say enough how much I respect all of you keeping at it. But continue to do your best to resist disappointment. I get it. We're disappointed too. Even it has nothing to do with age or experience. I mean, I look at it from a career standpoint. I'm disappointed that we're still living mostly in this virtual space and that we can't be together as much as we'd like to live. But the key is not to give up. I know people are starting to laugh at me when I say this. We won't be in this posture forever. I know it seems like we will be, but I assure you, I like to think that there have to be mortarboarders out there in the medical and scientific community. They're working on this right now. I put my faith in those people, and this will get sorted out in due course. And we have to do our part, to keep those that are in our lives and our organizations moving forward and pushing through it. There are some good lessons though to learn as leaders right now. One is to learn the art of the pivot. And that seems pretty obvious. I mean, you're going one direction, there's an obstacle, pivot, turn, get around the obstacle. But that can be easier said than done. I mean, I'll give you an example in my world, in my industry. Again, we usually do, live events, and I could have said, well, I guess I'll just pack it up and wait for events to come back live. Then of course I wouldn't have a company, I wouldn't have any revenue, I wouldn't be making a living. I'd have to find a new career. So instead, we decided we would pivot into this virtual and broadcast space. And that's made a big difference. We were able to, and it's hard to work your way in there because there are people who've been in the virtual and broadcast space for quite some time. So to be able to break through those barriers and come in and get established, I mean, that takes some doing. So, be dedicated, motivated, and don't be afraid to figure out how to get around the obstacle. I've been making the argument that your goals for your events and the events that you want to do should remain the same. And your process should be similar, if not the same, but the difference is your mechanism. So instead of being able to do events live, maybe now we're into this hybrid world, or maybe we're still virtual. So the mechanism of delivery is different, but keep the goals and your process, the same, if not similar. It's a good life lesson to learn right now at your ages, right? Life is hard. It just is. I tell my young daughters, today is the easiest day of your life, tomorrow, it just gets harder day by day. Life is hard, it's unexpected, but the good news is you're true leaders. Otherwise you wouldn't be here, and true leaders always persevere. So don't ever forget that you have the ability to solve these problems, not only alone, but even more importantly, together. All right. Moving into what you've all been waiting for and the event side of this. So what are special events? This is my definition. It's not really an academic definition. It's probably taken from a variety of different academic definitions, but I define events as marketing platforms utilized to create memories, which we talked about in the icebreaker, utilized to create memories, educate, or inspire action en masse. Again, it's a platform, it's a medium. This is the slide that's the biggest takeaway of the day. So if you want to take a minute to screenshot it or jot it down as I chat, go ahead. This is the recipe. The gentleman you see on the left is Dr. Goldblatt, who was both my thesis advisor and academic advisor in graduate school, but he was also one of the academic founding fathers of current production and event management academia, especially at the graduate level. And he's authored several books, and he has been a professor at many universities around the world. He's currently in Edinburgh, Scotland, at St. Margaret's, I believe. And he had a very basic recipe, what he called his 5 phases of event management. And those were research, design, planning, coordination, and evaluation. And I have humbly suggested to Dr. Goldblatt over the years that he's missing one. So you'll see I have a 6-point process of research, design, planning, coordination. Then I add execution and evaluation. And I will explain how we differ there. It's not so much a difference as that Dr. Goldblatt's model assumes that execution is part of coordination. I just argue it's a different step. So I add an extra step in the process. The first step is research. Now, research and then the final step, evaluation, in my opinion, are probably the two most overlooked, but together, quite possibly the most important phases of the process. All right, research is not the sexiest of the phases, but super important. All right, it's the means by which you ask the following questions: who, what, when, where, why, and how. And some of them are obvious and some of them you have to dig a little bit deeper. So who is the basic know your audience? So I'm going to try to step through this from the perspective of we're doing some sort of mortarboard event. Let's just say we're doing a fundraiser. Okay, so who is your audience? So you're doing this on campus. Is your audience all of the students on your campus? Is it just mortarboarders? Is it the community that the university is in? So both your on-campus, off-campus community, you have to know your audience. So if you don't know your audience, you obviously don't know how to target them and how to attract them to the event itself. Ask the question, what type of event are we doing? So are we doing, in this case, it's not just are we doing a live event versus virtual event, but are we doing a meeting? Are we doing a concert? Are we doing the fundraiser? Are we doing a bake sale? Are we doing, maybe we're just doing a press conference? What is it exactly that we're doing? So you have to define your audience and define the type of event that you think will target the audience based on messaging that you've determined you would like to put out to your audience. When sounds obvious, but it's not just a calendar date. Okay, when also refers to what else is going on in the time frame that you're trying to hold your event. So if we're doing an event on campus and you're trying to reach the student body, but it's winter break, well, that doesn't really help you target much audience because presumably they're not there, they're away on winter break. So it's not just, hey, we're doing it on this calendar day, but what else is going on? It could also mean, today on campuses, there's political upheaval. Like, is this a time of protest on campus? That could be hurtful or helpful to your event, depending on, what you're trying to achieve. But it really speaks to, beyond the calendar, what else is going on here in the time frame in which we would like to have our event. Similarly, where is just not saying, hey, we're having an event on campus. Okay, well, where on campus? Oh, we're having it in the Union Hall. Okay, well, where in the Union Hall? Well, in the lobby. Okay, well, where in the lobby? The lobby's huge. You're having it up against the window, or you're having it, next to the front doors, or you have to be very specific about your physical location and defining that. Why? This is so critical. And I tell everybody, if you can't answer this question, why are we having this event, then the event isn't worth having at all, because there's no point in putting forth resources, time, money, there's physical resources, human resources. There's no point in any of that because you're just wasting resources if you can't explain why you want to have this event. There has to be some sort of reason that you're trying to target your audience and build whatever that memory is. It's a message, it's an action, whatever that is. If you can't answer the reason why, there's no point in producing the event. And then how are we going to do that? What is the viability of this event? Do we have the physical resources, the human resources, the financial resources? Do we have enough lead time? Do we have a planning committee that can handle all of this? Right, these are important questions to ask. The good news is that during COVID, not much has changed, right? You have to ask these questions no matter what, whether it's live or virtual. And I jokingly say to my colleagues, we're going to kick the server now versus kicking the tires. The reason for that is a lot of this can be done when we do live events. We actually do site surveys and we show up and we look at the venue and, we try to establish, what we could do with a physical space. You might not be able to do that with COVID, depending on your campuses and your social distancing protocols. So you might have to dig into things a little more digitally, like finding floor plans or what have you. online and then building things out from there. But the good news is this process really doesn't change that much. If you can answer the questions, you're off to a great start. The next part of the process is design, and design is the process of articulating your event vision on paper. This is important because, creative design, it can be similar to the telephone game. All right, if one of you wants to hire me to produce your event and we have a conversation and I think I understand what you're after and you leave me alone to produce your event, I don't know, it's a 50-50 chance I get that right. I may knock your socks off, but on the other hand, you could come to me like, what was that? That's not at all what I was thinking. So it's critical to start, getting things logged down on paper. And there's a variety of ways in which we do this. I mean, the very first is we can just do a simple TikTok timeline of this is how we want our event to unfold. We want to open doors at 8 a.m. At 8:30, the band is going to start playing. At 9 o'clock, we'll have the first speaker speak, and 8:15 there'll be a raffle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just an outline of your event, a TikTok of what it is you want to accomplish, and then from there, that's going to evolve into what we call a production schedule. And again, that's more of like a 200 level course, but a production schedule is the means by which we really take that even further and break it down by second by second. So, okay, doors are opening at 8 o'clock, but at 7 a.m., we're going to set up tables and chairs. And, and 7:15 a.m., our talent's going to arrive and start warming up. And so you just break this down minute by minute. And then in addition to a production schedule, we would probably, definitely in our world, for live staging, we would create a variety of what we call plots, CAD drawings. We do plots for everything. What does our staging environment look like, our lighting environment, our audio environment, et cetera, et cetera. That's a little too, technical for what we're trying to achieve here. But the point is to make sure that you're putting everything down on paper so that everyone understands exactly what you're trying to achieve. So most critical are floor plans. So, okay, we're doing this event in the Union Lobby. We're going to have 2 tables in an L configuration and 4 chairs, and they're going to have a little stage over here for the band, and make sure everybody understands that plan so that there's no confusion on the day of your event, who's doing what and where things are going. This process usually, there's a lot of in-person participation in this process when we're not in COVID posture. So for COVID, and especially now we're in hybrid, some of you may be on campus and able to meet, and others may be coming in via Zoom. I always suggest to allow a little bit more time for collaboration given social distancing. And if you're doing a strictly virtual event and it's not, there isn't a live component, you can substitute a lot of the plots and plans that I mentioned with what we call storyboards. And the reason for that is obviously we're not putting physical things into, say, a Zoom meeting, right? We're having people come up and speak and present. So you may want to do little storyboards, which are like little comic strips, like, all right, Brian's going to come in and give an opening, for 5 minutes, and then Brooke's going to come in for 10 minutes and give a presentation, and then we're going to have a panel come up for 15 minutes. And it's just good for everybody to see how that flows. So just, consider that in lieu of hardcore plots and plans that we would normally do for the live venues. Planning is the process of identifying partners for event execution and establishing expectations and standards of delivery with those partners for your event execution. So again, for example, maybe for our event at the Union, we have facilities management has to bring in tables and chairs. You have the talent who maybe has to rent musical instruments that you have to have brought in. You have a staging company that has to bring a stage in. Maybe some decor has to come in. Maybe it's a crazy weather time of the year and you want to have a coat check company come in. You have to establish all of your internal and external partners. And by the way, this could be your planning committee too. They need their time to define their roles and responsibilities, but you're doing this in silos. So you break this down, and vendor by vendor, you're taking time to confirm with that partner what it is you're asking them to provide, when you're asking them to provide it, how long you want them to provide it for. And the one thing that's not always, but often forgotten is, when do they need to remove it? So not everything has to be removed, right? I mean, maybe there are some things that are perishable, but your tables and chairs have to come out at a certain time. We always want to leave our venue better than when we found it. That's just common courtesy. So always remember to schedule the removal just as well as you're scheduling your deliveries. So you start by working with them in silos. Okay, and again, traditionally, this process similar to what we're just speaking about. You're going to have a lot of normally a lot of personal interaction if you're in the live event space. You're going to probably be going over to vendor locations and talking to them, and a lot of time on phone, a lot of time in emails, a lot of time emailing plots back and forth to make sure that your vendor is on the same page, production schedules. But the good news is with COVID is that the exception of not seeing people in person, not much changes here either. Maybe just allow a little bit extra time again digitally for things to be absorbed as you're having these meetings. But this is really your time to dig in deep with each individual partner within a silo. That's the key takeaway here. Now, this is where I split off from Dr. Goldblatt in the coordination phase. Okay, so for Dr. Goldblatt, execution is in coordination, but in my model, coordination is the process of syncing up partners on logistics. So you just went through planning, right? We're just back here in planning, and we were in our silos with each individual partner. But now in coordination, it's time to bring all those partners together so that they can see how their role in the event impacts the partners coming in before and after them. Right, so your talent needs to understand that, well, your stage doesn't get set up until, don't come at 6 a.m. because the stage won't be set up till 7 a.m. So there's no point you arriving before the stage. So this is a point where you give everybody together, and in the live space, we do what's called a paper tech. We'll take our production schedule that has all of our TikTok line by line, and we'll actually step through it with all of the vendors one thing at a time. It's a great opportunity, so not only for the vendors to hear, or your partners to hear the sequence of what's happening, but it triggers questions to make sure that they may be able to trigger a question that says, hey, we're not sure of the sequence. Maybe we should do something differently based on what's happening before or what's happening after. So it's also an opportunity for you to modify your planning. All right, so now instead of working in silos like we were in the planning phase, we're working as a group. Traditionally, this phase, as you can imagine, has a lot of person-to-person communication because we're generally sitting in a giant conference room, or we're maybe at the venue, not on what we call game day, but we're at the venue and we're everybody's walking through and stepping through one pace at a time. And COVID posture doesn't allow us to do that. So again, stick with your video conferencing protocols, and again, allow greater time for feedback, but the process still stays the same. And the theme here is this is why we can still get through it, because not much changes in terms of the process. It's just the medium. You're just relying a little bit more on technology, a little bit more on platforms like Zoom. And as long as you allow enough time for the feedback, it can still be worked out smoothly and within proper fashion. And finally, execution. Execution is the real-time delivery. This is my addition. Execution is the real-time delivery of your event as it's intended to your target audience. So this is what we call in our world game day. Like, it's on. You're actually it's happening. It's showtime. Okay, and again, the key here is to know your medium, and it's important to know, what format you're working, whether it's live, whether it's hybrid, whether it's virtual. I can tell you that these new hybrid models where there are some people live and some people digital can be complex, and we could do a whole other conversation on that. I won't bog you down in that. If you have questions about it, you can certainly reach out to me separately from here, but they can be very complex, and definitely make sure you know the nuances of the platform you're working on, even within the digital space, platform to platform. Are you in Zoom? Are you in Ring Central? Are you on, are doing a WebEx? I mean, each platform has its nuances. So make sure you are comfortable with those nuances so that you don't have any, so that your event is installed in the process because someone isn't familiar with the platform and everything has to come to a stop live while you're trying to figure that out. Make sure you've allowed time to rehearse prior to execution. If you do have a live component of your event, of course, you want to know your social distancing protocols, and please implement them. That's so critical. And I don't know of any venue that's currently operating where, disinfection, cleanliness, spacing, isn't extremely critical. Please take that seriously. Allow time for that. And just safety first. Keep people safe. If your event is digital, we talked about know the features and limitation. That was knowing your medium. Some of these these platforms, actually Zoom has grown exponentially over the past 18 months, but some of the platforms like WebEx do have some limitations in terms of what you can do on them. So just, again, know those before you go in. And then finally, evaluation, which is the post-execution assessment of internal and external feedback related to your event. Again, this ties into research. Here's the reason why. Let's say you're doing an event, you're doing your mortarboard event, and it happens annually. If the next planning team after you is following the process correctly, the very first thing that they should do is research. And what is the very first thing that they will want to research? Your evaluations, because they'll want to know what worked and what didn't work the last time you tried to do this event. Okay, and that's why I say research and evaluation are overlooked, but critically important. And it's important to have both an internal and external evaluation process. It's important to know internally what you as a planning committee, your event planning team thinks went well and what didn't go well. It's important to know what your partners or your vendors, what they think went well or didn't go well, but it's also important to know what your audience thinks went well and didn't go well. So please make sure to, allow time to poll your audience. I know Mortarboard, for example, they'll ask you questions after every session. There's a reason for that. It's part of their evaluation process for their planning for next year's conference. So please take that seriously, and you're paying it forward. By doing a proper evaluation process, it allows you to pay it forward to the group that comes after you. So don't discount the importance of this phase, COVID or not, and especially just because you may have changed your medium, it's probably even more important because you have a medium change and you're in a different posture than you would normally be. You're going to want to help those coming after you and make sure they have a leg up on what comes next. And so with that, I will leave my contact information here. I know we're coming up to the top of the hour here, so I do want to give you time for some questions. Feel free to screenshot this if you'd like. I'm going to come back to this in a second, but this is the chance for you to ask advice pretty much on anything, not just on events or what I do for a living. You can ask me anything that's on your mind. I'm happy to address it, and please do feel free to reach out. That is my direct email. That's not a gatekeeper. That'll come directly to me. And I'm happy to take time after the conference to chat with you on email or talk to you by phone if you'd like to schedule some time. So with that, Kayla, I will turn it over to you.
Yep, I just reminded everybody that they are able to put their questions in the chat, or if you would like to, you are also able to unmute and ask Brian a question.
Absolutely. Yep. And I do totally get that it's the end of the day, and rightfully so, your brain should be fried. So I totally get that. But don't be shy.
There are a couple questions in Whova. The first one that I see is, how do we anticipate the outcome and success of an event that we have planned?
Mm-hmm. That's a phenomenal question. So two answers there. First, a lot of answers in this industry always start with it depends. It depends if this is an event that's occurred before or not. So the easier one is, well, if it's occurred before and everyone's been doing their research and evaluation processes correctly, you'll have some metrics that will point you in the direction of what works and what doesn't work, and you'll be able to make pretty educated decisions based on that. Now, if the event hasn't been done before, it gets a little trickier, and this is why that research phase is so critical. Admittedly, events are always a gamble. There's no guarantee. I've had people swear to me that thousands of people are going to come to their show, and they've been lucky to get 100. And I've had people who think no one's going to show up, get a venue for a couple hundred people, and it's standing room only, and they wish they had an arena. So it goes both ways. But the better the more research you can put into knowing your target audience and your demographics, combined with that last bullet point of how, the viability, those are probably the two most critical components. Knowing your audience, and then knowing what you have to work with in terms of financial resources, physical resources, and human resources. There's a direct correlation to all of that producing a successful event. But there's other than that, it is a little bit of Vegas, right? It's a little bit of let's bet on black and see what happens.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we have time for one more question. If anyone has any about like chapter events even.
Yeah, chapter events. I try to keep it general to not bog everybody down, but yeah, I'm happy to answer questions about specific chapter events or, you know what I do want to point out? One of the keys of the planning process is that, everything runs basically on a top-down hierarchy. So, if I'm in a producer role and under me, I have, a director and the stage manager and department heads and all of that jazz. One of the worst mistakes you can make is to try to do it all yourself. And you have to trust your team and your crew. You have to obviously work towards putting the appropriate human resources in the right place, but it is okay to delegate, and it is even more critical to trust in those that you have asked or selected to help you. It would be a mistake to think that the higher up in the hierarchy you are, the more important of a person you are. That's not the case. If you're in my industry, if I'm in a producer chair and I'm doing this, I'm producer, hear me roar, nobody below me is going to respect me. And frankly, they're doing the real hard work. So, and no producer can step away from their chair, no director can step away from their chair and simultaneously run all of the departments that are required to handle any one event. So please just keep that in mind. You don't try to absorb it all. And conversely, it's okay to trust. You have to trust the others that are working with you. And please give them the praise and the respect that they deserve, because they're going to be doing the hard work. Please keep that in mind.
I think that is a very important life lesson that I know I have certainly had to learn in my leadership journey. So thanks for sharing that, Brian.
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Maybe as we wrap up this evening, Bailey from Albion College put in the chat, she asked, what are some of the most successful or popular events that you have seen throughout chapters?
That's always a hard question for me to ask, because there's so many good ones out there, and every campus is different, right? You have the variables of size of campus and size of chapter and financial resources. So truly, I've seen everything from simple community service events that attract people to, again, I always use the bake sales. I've seen a lot of bake sales. That tends to come up a lot when I'm helping chapters. And then, I always think back at my time at Purdue, which I guess if maybe it's a stretch to call it an event, although it could, I guess, theoretically be one. But, Purdue produces what we call the physical mortarboard calendar. I mean, at Purdue, the students call them their mortarboards, which I'm surprised still exists today with all the digital technology. But when I went to Purdue, we didn't have all of the fancy digital technology. So you'd go to the bookstore and you'd buy mortarboard sponsored the calendar that had all of the university events for the year in it. All the breaks, all the class schedules, all the fun stuff happening on campus, all the big student organization events. And that was a big deal to be able to go out to the bookstores and get your mortarboard. And like every student, I don't think the students even understood mortarboard was an organization. I certainly didn't realize that when I was a freshman and sophomore. I just thought mortarboard was a thing, like that was the calendar. And it was tremendously successful because the revenue coming in from that on the Big Ten campus being a sizable student body was pretty impressive. So, it depends. And I see Grace in the chat asking the question about how to increase visibility on campus with a small budget. My answer there is, I actually think you probably have, in some cases, have a better chance of being more visible on a small campus because your target audience is smaller. So by being present in your community, by being involved with your administration and the external campus community, you just by nature of being involved, you're going to be more visible. And that will hopefully draw attention to your organization. So it doesn't just have to be events, is my point. It's your involvement with your fellow students, with fellow student organizations, with your administration, and with your community leaders. That was another thing that Purdue did very well. Not just mortarboard, but student organizations. The successful student organizations were really keyed into the university, and then Purdue is in West Lafayette, Indiana, the West Lafayette community in general. So the more involved you were, the more support your organization received because the community was willing to support you. So keep that in mind.
I'm looking at the time. It's now 1 past.
I'm sorry.
I think we'll wrap us up. Thank you
Great.
so much, Brian. We're
Yeah,
always
you're
so
welcome.
grateful to have you back.